Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Vinay Singh, who is both the Chief Financial Officer and the Chief AI Officer at HUD, to talk about AI and how his team is forging a path toward innovation at the department. I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Optimal Blue, for making this episode possible. Vinay, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. Good to be here.
Great to have you here. Of course, you were on our stage when we had our AI Summit.
Yes.
We so appreciated that because you're not just the CFO of HUD, of course, you're the Chief AI Officer. So we really enjoyed that presentation. I know our audience did. So I wanted to have you on and talk a little bit more, get into some more details on that. Before we do, though, I feel like, we just had an election. We have some plans in the works potentially from the incoming president. So just didn't know if you wanted to talk about HUD in this moment.
Thank you for that opportunity. Yes, we did just have an election. I will say that I think regardless of party, regardless of positions people have, housing is fundamental, continues to be fundamental for communities and the people in those communities to thrive. I know that this leadership team and this career team are very proud of what they've done for many years, but definitely in the last 3.5 years, we've seen significant steps to lock in some of the opportunities that people have, whether it is in public housing, whether it is through disaster recovery grants, through our CDBG block grants, and various aspects of homelessness and energy efficiency with our green resilient retrofit program. So there's numerous places we can hang our hat on, but we're not done, right? So this continues to be a challenge, and I hope that ongoing administration continues with the journey we've set forth.
Well, I appreciate you. I know you guys are super busy. You've got all sorts of things coming on. Just to set the stage, because if people weren't at our AI Summit, they might be confused about how one can be a CFO and the Chief AI Officer and how that came about.
Sure. So long story short, yes, I was put in as CFO in July 2022. And about 6 months prior to the executive order in October of last year, I had started exploring AI for my position inside of CFO. Obviously, there was hype in the market and things were going on. And I'm always looking as a transformation person for ways that our team could impact and amplify our mission. And so technology transformation. And I saw AI as a potential leapfrog moment, government procurement, government technology, especially at HUD, where we're vastly underfunded and lack the flexibilities to do some of the things we want with technology. AI was the solution for me from a CFO. So then fast forward, so I worked with the CIO at that time, Beth Neblock, and so we engaged a working group across CFO. And to my surprise, within 3 months, we had 30 or more volunteers. Our assistant CFO, Kate Darling, was driving that initiative. And so then when the executive order did come out and folks, leadership asked Beth, because as is common, I think in most organizations, the chief AI officer role was going to a chief tech or a chief information officer or even a chief data officer. And so when they asked Beth, she basically said, you should talk to Vinay because it seems like he's already started this journey and he may be better suited. And so long story short, here we are. And it's been a privilege really to get involved in this initiative.
So, just the idea of, HUD, which is an agency that is still doing modernization efforts, right, from a technology perspective, really taking the lead in on AI, but you guys have. So tell me how that works. How do you start? Where did you start?
We started where typical change management exercises start from my career, which is forming the team, right? So once I was named, we went through the construct of having boards and committees, but then really kind of storming our way through. And what I mean by that is for change management to be effective, you need significant communication. And so listening sessions were right up my alley, and I basically teed those up in December and January of last year with every program, every supporting office. What are you concerned about? I know you've heard this phrase, AI. What worries you? What things you think you can do better? How do you see this playing out? And through those listening sessions, and then balancing it against our actual requirements, against what the executive order and the final OMB guidance required, we went through and started executing on those initiatives. But it was a team building. It was an opportunity for us to really kind of build an ad hoc team. So the chief AI officer role and the team I have is really a blend of folks from our chief data office, our chief information office, our policy data research team, a lot of volunteers, including our CFO team, but all the back end offices you can think of, with human capital being critical, procurement being critical. We've really come together and built a foundation, which I hope that will sustain.
You haven't had a lot. I'm asking you this question. You haven't had a lot of time to do this, right? But what do you feel like you have already accomplished?
Well, I think it's the culture, right? So anytime you have a new initiative like this, something that is not just as I keep alluding to the example of, this is not a ERP or an enterprise resource planning upgrade, not a typical tech upgrade. This is technology that is invasive to every facet of an organization. I think we've made a lot of inroads in, as I said, putting this informal team together, having those champions, AI champions that see the benefits, but also see the risks, right? And having people involved in this team that are also looking out to protect our mission, because HUD's mission of creating strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable housing for all, protecting that mission, we're serving the underserved. So at every step, we want to have people involved in this team. And I think we've done that and we'll continue to do that. But I'm very proud of the team that we've coalesced around it.
You mentioned a leapfrog moment, and it's one of the things that I'm very interested in when it comes to technology, but especially AI, is will it meet what we've said, the promise that we've heard for so long, which is like it really will help like the little guy, if you want to say that, or maybe, does it help companies compete with other companies? Does it help a company that is, at a certain point this time, they're not the biggest?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? And I feel like in that moment, how did you feel like it could be the leapfrog moment for HUD?
Well, just, given all agencies' constraints around resources and time to do things, we've got a priority list like every organization might have of 500 important things. Or look at our strategic goals and objectives, right? It's laid out there. But given constraints and shifting priorities, we are always focused on the top 10, top 15. Things like AI, if used appropriately, at least what I'm seeing in government organizations, is document summarization. I mean, government documents are never easy to read or understand. Things like, obviously, the plus side of AI is the predictive analytics, seeing around the corners, things of that nature, pattern recognition, but even just enabling our workforce to move from priorities 1 to 15 and actually get to 35 to 55, right? To give them that time, because there's so many important pieces that are required to make housing affordable, to ensure that communities are safe and secure and have the resources they need to grow and build. We don't always get to that. And this is not just a point saying we don't have enough money, always give us enough money, more money. I know, and when I said leapfrog, to me, I believe that citizen service delivery around the world for every government is going to be fundamentally changed, because every government has that constant constraint of budget pressures. So something like this, actually, even if it's freeing up 10 to 15% of your time, if you're an organization that has 8,000 people, that's a significant savings where you can then go on to do other things that are still aligned to the mission, protect the mission, amplify the mission.
You talked about the cultural change and how big that is. And I think that that's the same with a lot of the companies that are in our audience, right? Whether it's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
a mortgage lender, if it's a real estate firm, if it's a title company. How do you gathered leadership? People, it seems like, you even had people who were volunteering, like they wanted to be on this committee. You're looking at that. How do you make sure that people don't feel threatened by AI?
So it's a daily journey. I mean, every organization, rightly, as you said, Sarah, folks are concerned about their jobs. Is this going to take my job? Anytime new technology comes, and especially more so, I think, with AI and the hype around it. I think, what I'll use from the Honorable Todman, she told me last year, AI is somewhere between Star Trek and Skynet. Right. So the references to the movies of it can be really all good, but there are a lot of fears. How do you get people to kind of embrace or engage or understand? Is this journey that we've started on a year ago or so ago, not just with listening, but also with literacy? in the training, in the education. We were able to finally do an all hands Gartner training that just talked about what is AI, not even talking about what it can be, but like, what are we talking about here? Because not many folks even understand what it is, even though we've been using it in our personal lives for over a decade. So I think it's really just that. Again, like I said, in the big initiatives, in crisis moments or big change moments, communication is key. So having a constant dialogue has been critical. We've been trying to do that with all our partners, as witnessed by me coming down and speaking at your HousingWire Summit, which was great. But even to our union partners at the Labor Management Forum, keeping them engaged, keeping the Inspector General's office engaged in what we're doing, briefing the Hill when asked to, and then just keeping folks on the journey. I share a newsletter. It's not a HUD letter, but it's a personal newsletter about housing progress. Or housing, let's say, uses of AI across, housing sectors and communities. Just doing that itself is teaching us, right? And it doesn't say that AI is going to solve everything, but we're learning from others' mistakes. We're learning in this journey together, because sitting in a committee or a board or in a back room making policy is not the way it happens. This is going to be more middle out. We need to hear the pulse, know the pulse. What are people seeing and hearing and doing so that we don't make those mistakes? But then continuing to educate and elevate folks' understanding of this. And stopping where putting the guardrails where we need to. This is why I keep saying every person is important, or AI is all in, because we can't do that with just 10, 20, 50 leaders. We need to know the work is done at the grassroots, in a community, in a tribal organization, where they're touching pieces that HUD can interact with. We need to know to make sure that AI is not being used in any nefarious way that would impede our mission.
I think that's the second thing, right? The first reaction is like, is this going to be my job? Second thing is like, chat GPT has been great. The hallucinations, probably not so much, as far as like people understanding how it can be wrong. In fact, just today I was trying to look up the age of someone, and it told me they were 17. They're actually 57. Just saying. So I knew they couldn't be 17 because they've been in the industry for decades. So it's just funny how I think, part of the reason that AI is so big in our consciousness is we now can use it in our everyday life, right? I mean,
Right.
we've been using it, right? AI has been part of a lot of things, but with ChatGPT, people are like, oh, this is personal now. I can see it work and see it not work.
Yeah.
When you think about that at the level of, use cases at a place like HUD, what guardrails can you put in place? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, so we put out a lot of guidance. I think earlier I spoke about this at the conference, but in early April or mid-April, around housing use of algorithms, whether it's with advertising or tenant screening. So and those policies that we refreshed, let's say, really link back to existing guidelines, policies, and the Fair Housing Act that we already have, that talks about privacy, that talks about not being discriminatory, not having bias, fairness, equity. So a lot of that already exists in organizational documents. So this is essentially saying AI is one type of technology that doesn't change some of that language. Even if it's a user at HUD, if you go on and use it, we have tools, pop-up blockers that remind you that, when you signed on to work at HUD, you cannot share certain information. Not all information is public. And so those are the initial guardrails. I know some agencies have done more. Some agencies have opened up more, and some have restricted more. At HUD, essentially, we see AI as coming through programs having ideas to better enable their missions. And so it'll go through the normal OCIO process of a proof of concept. From a proof of concept, which is aligned to how the OMB describes a use case R&D type, potentially it'll go to a use case. But then we have all the governance around it, right? The right way for approvals and committees and workforce impacts and lawyers and folks to make sure we align with our bargaining unit obligations. There are checklists. So this is essentially reminding, educating, maybe refreshing a few things here and there, but it's not a lot. And most of the refreshing elements are in policies around privacy and just re-enhancing those. So that's essentially what we see, and we continue to learn more, right? So I talk often to other chief AI officers other chief information officers, government and non-government, in really understanding how they're framing it. Because, this is an unfunded mandate for us. So this volunteer group that I've cobbled together also is doing things, very kind of lean and mean. And so we want to share best and next practices. So, and I don't mean just by convening at the White House once a month. I mean, I've built relationships, and not just me, but I've encouraged my team to come along with that, to meet other teams, to meet, chief data officer over at SEC. What are they doing? Because SEC data is pretty critical. So we can learn a lot. We can share documents a lot. And so we're starting to get better at that.
Has there been, what would be the closest thing to that before AI that you did that sort of cross collaboration or communication with other governmental agencies?
Well, I can't speak for HUD. I've only been here coming up on 3. I know at Commerce, we did that, since Commerce Industries in the name of the agency. We did that a lot. We engaged all the time on policy frameworks, with whether it's trade or not. But we did that through that kind of just engagement. And again, why our leadership wanted me to be speaking to, the members of HousingWire, right? To show that we can't do this alone. So I don't know if HUD has actually engaged in anything like this. I'm hearing or have heard from some folks that HUD has never really done anything like this. But I don't know any other way to do it. Again, not just because it's unfunded, but it's unprecedented in what we're trying to learn. We're creating a new C-suite role of an agency that has such a critical policy. We really need to do this delicately, but make sure that we're not left behind. Yeah.
It would be easy as an unfunded mandate, and also just with the enormity of what you have to do, and all of these things, to kind of not like you wouldn't be working on it, but to kind of sit back and be like, okay, well, let's see what other people do, or let's see how this shakes out in 6 months. And I think that the companies out there in our space have the same decision to make. Do I jump in now and really try to understand it? Or would it just be better to wait 6 months, wait a year, see what kind of shakes out? So how did you make that decision? And what do you think the benefits are for jumping in sooner rather than later?
Yeah, given my background, I'd always jump in first. But we did have these discussions, right? So do you want to get an A on the report card of the executive order and OMB? Or because we don't have the funds or the time or the resources, do we just come in and scrape through and see what everyone else is doing? I think, again, the case I made was around the leapfrogging elements. I mean, HUD's history with technology, and some of the good and the bad, and just kind of the decades of, as you mentioned, the technology modernization projects that have been ongoing. I think I made the case that this can be more, use of AI potentially can be more targeted, lower cost, and tested in a way that we can get people understanding it, train the trainers, create AI champions, and see if there's something there. And if there's nothing there, it's not a huge investment, because there is no investment yet, right? And so it's more of a learning experience. But I'll tell you, Sarah, the thing that really got me, and I shared it with leadership early on when we started AI at CFO, was the 30 plus volunteers I got. The fact that so many of them were younger, newer to government folks. So then it became a recruitment and retention strategy for me, because people that are coming into the workforce are already learning this. This is day to day in most universities, maybe not to the aspect of deep, large language models, but the understanding, the fears, the concerns, and the guardrails, knowing it. So how are you going to get folks? It's so hard to hire good public service employees. And if this is one of the tools that we now have as an agency, that's phenomenal. I talked to Sarah and Beth as well from CIO about this. I mean, we're always struggling to get the right people here that understand not just technology, but want to be here and use that technology to better the mission. What a better way to do it. So I also put it in that lens.
I love that. So, you had that top-down leadership. You're coming in as a leader, but seeing those 30 people raise their hands, and I mean, that sort of tells you like you have the momentum within the
Yes.
workforce.
Yes, absolutely.
Very interesting. Okay, so what, from your perspective, do you hope, what makes you excited when you think about how AI could be expressed, or a use case of AI within HUD, in the next, not like 10 years from now, but like,
Sure.
what's exciting about what could be possible even in the next year?
Yeah, I mean, they're clustering a lot of the solutions that I get excited about are clustering around customer experience or citizen experience. So the use of not just chatbots, but better ways to interpret our information. It's just
Mm.
really, every agency has this challenge. We've got, great platforms, great initiatives to help folks, but oftentimes very, very, difficult to interpret, difficult to understand. Where do I go? Where do I start? So I think definitely over the next 12 to 18 months, we hope to see more of that. And we want to do that with other agencies. I think that's number one. Number two, and putting my CFO hat on, and I talked to the IG a bit about this, is all the aspects of fraud, waste, and abuse. AI has an opportunity here, if shared data correctly and through the right protocols of privacy, et cetera, to really minimize that, but also just to actually bring that to be transparent, because there's so much data we just don't have access to or can't even analyze and look at those patterns and trends, et cetera, to make better estimates. And so I see that as a life cycle, that when you get better at mitigating for fraud, waste, and abuse, and then when you go and pitch your budgets, you're on a platform that you're showing good financial stewardship, and so then they want to fund you more to do more things. So you get, it's kind of it's a full circle. And so those are the two biggest areas. I know that many cities are using it for disaster recovery. I know, HUD is involved with FEMA and SBA. There are discussions there as well on how can AI potentially help in disaster recovery. Obviously, predictive analytics with homelessness. I know Los Angeles is looking into that. Emergency preparedness I talk about. But those are the kind of the big pieces that I think we have to go after, outside of just making some of the transactional day-to-day work also just better, right? So having workbooks and Excel files managing large accounts and billions of dollars is not a sustainable solution for delivering public service. And so that's where I see really big impacts coming.
What is something that you've learned since taking on the chief AI officer role that maybe is different than the CFO role? Like, what have you learned in that?
That is a great, great question. What have I learned outside the navigating? I think it's just refreshed me on, because CFO role is so specific, right? I have my budget team, my audit team, my accounting team, my risk team, and you can get into the weeds on that. I've done those jobs. I think chief AI officer took me back a little bit more to almost my internal audit days, or just organizational process days of seeing change again. How do you affect, and refreshing my skills at making change effective. So when you look at the PMP model, the project management professional model of change, they look at forming a team, then the storming of the team, then the normalization or the norming, and then the performing, right? And so I think we're now at the cusp of normalizing, and the performing part is the hard piece, which is organizational culture. It's people-to-people relationships. I've done that in my career before, but doing it in a governmental setting, having the second title, that's what I learned a lot more about that, and where people are on that a spectrum of change and change acceptance.
It sounds exciting. I mean, you've been, it sounds like a lot more work, right? To have
Yeah.
two chief titles, but at
Yeah.
the same time, it seems like it could have been also fun.
Oh, it's incredibly still exhilarating. In fact, this morning, we had a kind of a huddle on transition planning and AI organization. And, I am always enamored by all the public servants, service employees that I have and that work for all governments. But when you see the positivity, as I mentioned, not just from recruitment or learning, but people are really excited to also learn about this because it's being talked about everywhere. And so the fact that they have a chance to just be involved and learn and then express their opinion, because I have a platform where, this is so new that there's not going to be a funnel of, if you have a problem, email this person. It's like in real time, we need to know, is there a concern? So it's been exciting for me because I can see the energy it yields around me, right? So it continues to we feed on ourselves, I guess.
What's next for you?
That's a good point. Talked to my wife about it this weekend. After January 20th, typically we'll take a holiday. It is around coming up on some holiday time, and I'd like to kind of reset my thinking. I've done a lot of different things in my career, and I'm not really sure where I want to go next, but I do know I want to continue, not maybe working for governments, but definitely helping governments. So it might be more on a local level, state level, but just continuing to help enhance public service delivery, because I just think that it's always challenged. Governments are always constrained. And I think with the knowledge that I've converged over the last couple of decades, I hope to give back in that way.
Well, and I want to be clear, this was something that you decided before the recent election. I mean, this is something that you gave notice on for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I told my team I would stay till the end because we also have an audit that's ongoing right now, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get our fifth clean audit opinion this Friday. And so it's important for me. I think continuity and team, and transitions are tough. People can go through a lot of different things, and I think having solid leadership, or at least continuity of leadership, is critical. So I look forward to that.
I really appreciate you sitting down with us. I appreciate it, the way that you worked with us on the AI Summit, because you're just doing some really interesting things. So best of luck to you, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.